All right, everyone, welcome, blessings. So good to have you back here this week for our workshop series on trauma healing and Ayurveda. And we've been diving really deep these last number of sessions into Ayurvedic psychology, into techniques around prioritizing spiritual practice as a way to help rewire the subconscious mind and reprogram those conditioned ways of being that may have been affected from either early childhood experiences or really experiences any other time in life that created an imprint in you. And so today we're going to share our session primarily with practice. We're going to do the practices together that we've been doing in a really simple way. And then we're going to go into the topic of mental digestion and mental detoxification. So how to detox the manas, the mind, through three different levels: physical, subtle, and causal. And we'll go into that, what all those mean, and different ways to detoxify the mind so that you can set yourself up over the next upcoming days and weeks, and really think about an established period of time that you can start to kickstart yourself into some of these practices if you haven't been already, because I think most of you have been engaging here in the last number of weeks. But we'll get a little more practical and specific and experiential today, and I will also give you some notes to take. So yes, blessings and good day, good evening. Great. So let's just dive right into our practices. We've been doing these each week. We're going to start with the two breathwork practices. We're going to do the simplified version together. If you've learned the other versions, and I'll prompt you to do those, but I'm not going to go through all the explanation because we've been doing them. And for those of you listening to this recording, listen to previous either episodes of the podcast or previous workshops that are recorded on YouTube to get all the details. But today we'll do the very simple version so we can just dive right in. I have a sweet little meditation poem reading for you. So we'll take a moment of spaciousness to just be with these words that inspire and awaken that divine essence within. And then we'll get into the mental digestion and detoxification of manas and practices to do that. So let's begin by putting down any distractions and even books and pens for a moment and just sitting back into your comfortable seat, just starting to tune into the breath, taking a few deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. In through the nose, allowing the belly to be full and relaxed as you inhale. And exhale, just letting it all go. And you can even let out a little sigh if that feels good. It helps you connect to your voice and releasing any tension out of the body through sound. Very good. So the first breath practice is the bee humming breath. If you know this one with the ears closed, and it's appropriate for you at this time, you're welcome to do it. Otherwise, we're just going to take a deep breath in and exhale with a humming sound 3 times. As long as you can make that humming sound, this will help us tune into that subtle vibration, that divine indwelling, the hum of the universe, and it brings calm and peace to the whole nervous system. And then the second one we'll do is Hari Om, which is our mantra breath. And if you know this one with the head movement, you're welcome to do it. Otherwise, we'll just do it together, just chanting it. And we'll chant that one a number of times as part of our mantra meditation practice, which we'll be talking about today as well. So now that you've tuned in to the deeper breath in the belly, go ahead and take a full deep inhale and exhale all the air out, making space. Take another full deep inhale and exhale with the humming sound 3 times. Just pause for a moment and observe. And next is the mantra breath practice. Hari Om, that connects us to that full energy circuit in the body. And take a deep breath in and exhale with Hari Om. Hari Beautiful. And just continue the Hari Om chant as a chant. A few more times. Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Om. And pause and observe. And we'll do one little Hari Om melody chant that's kind of like call and response. So I'll sing a line and then you repeat it back to me. I'll still sing both lines so you can sing along with me, but you'll get to hear it once and repeat it once so that you can learn the little tune. And sometimes it's nice to chant mantra to a melody because just like a song gets stuck in our head, these mantras repeat in our head and tend to come in right at the perfect moment to support our focus of the mind and our withdrawal of the senses into something productive when the mind is erratic and fluctuating a lot. So it's nice to do melody mantras as well and learn the little melodies and then sing them throughout the day. So this one goes like this, and just call and response. So I'll repeat each line twice so you can learn it and sing with me. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Om. Your turn. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Om. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Hari Om. With me. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Hari Om. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Hari Om. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Hari Om. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Om. So just repeat it with me now as much as you know. We'll do one line each time and so repeating it, and we'll do this maybe 3 or so times. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Om. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Hari Om. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Hari Om. Hari Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari 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 Om. Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Hari Om. Hari Hari Om. This body is made of earth and gold, sky and stars, rivers and oceans, masquerading as muscle and bone. Every substance is here: diamonds and silver, magical elixirs, ambrosia that gives visions, herbs that nourish and heal. The foundation of the planet, immortal magnetic iron circulating in the blood. Every element in you loves the others. Earth loves rain, sky loves sun, sun loves the space it shines through. Space loves everyone equally. In meditation, luxuriate in knowing this deep and simple truth. Every cell is an organ of sense, infused with majesty. What a beautiful reminder that all of these elements, these essential aspects, components of all of existence are dancing right now in these bodies. To me, it reminds me of the body's innate ability to heal. What does it remind you? You don't necessarily have to answer in the chat or anything, just reflecting. Unless there's something you feel excited to share, you are more than welcome. So, our content portion this evening is going to be succinct and straightforward and very practical, in that we've shared a lot of information over the last few workshops. So I want to give you some practical ways to apply some of the things we've discussed. And again, if you're listening to this on recording and want to go back for deeper context or to revisit any of the things that we've unpacked around Ayurvedic psychology and the terms and the different components of the Antikarna, this inner organ that we didn't even know we had. And we can feel free to go back and listen to those previous episodes and workshops. recorded workshops. But we have been talking a lot about manas, and manas meaning that first part of the Antikarna that takes in a sensory impression and it immediately says, I like it or I don't like it, right? Then the sensory impression goes to the buddhi, our reasoning faculty of higher intelligence. The buddhi has the ability to see things as they are, but it also can be overridden by an unruly manas, unruly mind, mental fluctuations. And so the first line of defense, the first phase of healing what's deeper in the subconscious mind and in the chitta, these samskaras, these impressions, the first step to really being able to unearth any of the traumas or the conditioned imprints, the conditioned ways of being, which is chitta. The first phase to allow those to really unearth and come to the surface is to start to detoxify the mind itself. So when we use the analogy of detoxifying the body, usually before we do some type of cleanse or detoxification, we need to do what first? What needs to happen before you do a big detox program? You need to cut out whatever toxins you're putting in, right? So you need to stop smoking, drinking alcohol, eating cupcakes, snacking on goldfish and nachos, whatever. I don't think that any of you watching this are probably maybe not in that realm of goldfish and nachos. I think those are two of the things that I used to love as a kid. So it's making me think of it. But, any of those things like gluten and dairy are things that we know are clogging to our system. We can't be consuming those if we're going to detox, right? So the first step is to stop the poisoning, stop the toxins coming in, and then we can actually go into the deeper tissues of the body to be able to release what's there. Because if the body has to keep firefighting because there's more stuff coming in, well, then it only has enough bandwidth to process so much. So it's only trying to process what's coming in order to allow deeper tissues to release whatever toxins have been embedded in them, such as going through Ayurvedic Panchakarma or cleansing or detoxification protocol. We stop the putting toxins in when we start really simplifying, and then we encourage and ripen those toxins to come out through channels of elimination, as well as through the skin. So urine, feces, sweat are 3 channels for releasing toxins out of the physical body. Well, then how do you detoxify the subtle body, the Antikarna, right? It's the same thing. So we have, or it's a similar thing, right? So we have mental digestion that needs to happen. And if we're digesting our sensory impressions, thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, everything we think, everything we've ever experienced, all of our feelings around all those things that we've ever experienced, all those sensory impressions, those are most of those from the past ones anyway, are lodged in the chitta. And if there are, which is the storehouse of the memories, right? They're lodged in the chitta. They're lodged in the subconscious mind as well. And so what do we have to do to unearth those in an easeful, healthy way so that they can be properly digested, transformed, transmuted, and released out of the system so that they no longer rule over your physiology and, create either a hypervigilance or a hypersensitivity or various other tendencies. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to start with manas. We have to start with detoxifying the mind itself, and calms and start to tame some of the mental fluctuations, which is the very nature of the mind, and so that the deeper stuff can also be processed out. So I want to share with you today the methods of doing that, and a very, very simple way to approach that and to start to do that. So first, when it comes to higher purpose, so zooming out a million feet up, looking at, I have a quote from Dr. David Frawley. Why does the mind even exist? What does this mean to our higher spiritual evolution? And so the mind exists to provide experience and liberation for the soul. Experience that we have digested or understood brings freedom and allows for the expansion of awareness, just as food we have digested releases energy that allows us to work. Experience that we have not digested becomes a toxin and initiates various pathological changes in the mind, just as undigested food causes the disease process in the physical body. Just as well-digested food brings physical happiness and undigested food causes disease, also well-digested experience brings mental happiness, and poorly digested experience causes mental imbalance, mental disorder. So the mind has its own patterns. The Antikarna has its own ways of digesting, which is very similar to the physical body. So we've talked about, the outer mind gathers, the manas gathers these sensory impressions. These are food. We've also talked about food for the mind. What are the foods you are feeding your mind? You read sattvic food that is sattvic or full of peace and harmony and light and spiritual substance. Sattvic food. We've talked about rajasic food, where you could feed your mind rajasic food, which is kind of anything that gives it like a dopamine hit, scrolling, entertainment, sitting back in front of the TV and just being taken for a ride where you kind of check out. And that borders on tamas, but tamasic food is anything that is numbing to the mind. So tamas is dullness, ignorance, inertia. So anything that feeds the mind more dulling things. So really violent TV shows or binge watching TV shows. This would be, say, tamasic food for the mind. Rajasic food for the mind might also just be engaging in a lot of different activities or sensory impressions. Think the epitome of rajas would be like walking in New York City with all the flashing, blinking lights, billboards, things, people trying to get your attention with flyers, right? Like that's like the epitome of rajasic food for your senses. It's, first of all, it's unnatural. So sattvic food would be nature-esque. So sensory impressions that are sattvic would be staring out at a river, watching a waterfall, watching the river flow, watching the ocean, looking at the birds in the trees, listening to the sounds of the song of the bird, listening to the rustling of the leaves in the wind, watching the boughs of the trees dance in the wind, listening or reading poetry, art, These are all sattvic foods, sattvic impressions for the mind that leave the mind feeling uplifted and more clear. You know that it's a rajasic food if your mind feels more excited and agitated. And it doesn't even have to be a negative excitement or agitation. It could be exhilaration. It could be skydiving, would be a very rajasic activity that maybe brings for some, not for me, but for some, a lot of positive excitement, but it's still rajasic food because you're, even just downhill sports, that fast adrenaline rush, these would be rajasic foods. And tamasic foods, you'll know that a mental impression is tamasic if it leaves your mind feeling more dull. And so none of these categories of foods for the mind are to say positive, negative, or right and wrong. All labels and measurements of positive, negative, right and wrong exist in the mind, because the mind, the manas, is dualistic. So let go of that as I give examples. Just tune into, really at the end of the day, how my mind is left feeling is more the impression of is more the quality of the impression that I am consuming. Does that make sense? Because there's also healthy expressions of sattva, rajas, and tamas. And then there's unproductive or unhealthy expressions of all of them. So like a healthy expression of tamas would be like, at night we need to go to sleep. The mind needs to become dull and pull us down so that our head hits the pillow and we fall asleep. That's tamas. Tamas happens at nighttime, naturally. Rajas, even talking and reading, talking or consuming information, like the activity we're doing here right now, whether you're listening or watching, is rajasic, but it also is feeding you sattvic information. So it's supportive. And ideally, it will still leave you feeling more clear after. And then sattvic food. Anne says gardening absolutely is sattvic. Yes. And Andrew said nature operates in us as it does in the outer world. That was to our earlier poem reflection. That's really beautiful. Yes, it does. So all of these elements of nature as well, sattva, rajas, tamas, ether, air, fire, water, earth, all of the elements existing in nature exist in our physiology and exist in our subtle body, our sukshma sharira, the subtle body, which is where the Antikarna lives. And remember, the Antikarna is this subtle organ, but an organ that is inherently about movements. It's a process. Antikarna means inner processes of the mind, the thoughts, and how the mind processes those. So, in order to improve your manas, mental digestion, we need to feed manas healthy foods at the appropriate time. Because there actually is a time, like I said, there's a time for each of sattva and rajas and tamasic foods for the mind. You want to be able to go to sleep at night. You want to feed your mind sort of tamasic, kind of sattvic tamasic things to just help you go to sleep. You want to engage in rajasic activities at times when it's appropriate, like right now, having good conversations with people, but hopefully they all leave you feeling uplifted overall. But sattva as a category is what we want to strive for. Feeding the mind, sattvic foods primarily. So start to consider, you can even write on a piece of paper, what are all the sensory impressions that I take in a day? So just like make a dump list. You can do this after we wrap up, or pause this on the recording and just take a big blank sheet of paper and just start free writing. What are all of the sensory impressions that I take in a day? Just like you would take in a food log, a food journal, right? What are all the things I put into my mouth all day long? And you can do it just off the top of your head, doing a free writing exercise in like 5 minutes, or you can have that little note, either electronic notepad on your device, on your phone, or on a journal, and you can actually write it down all day long and do a 12-hour or 24-hour. Obviously you won't be writing much while you're sleeping, hopefully because you're sleeping and rejuvenating, but you can just write all day long all of the sensory impressions that you intake. And at least I know that the iPhones these days have like a little gauge on there. It tells you how many hours a day on average you spend looking, like with that device on. That might be one, looking at that setting, if your phone has that. I don't know if all the phones have that, but looking at how many hours a week or how many hours a day that you spend on a device is a good gauge of how many hours you spend in a rajasic kind of stimulation. And obviously not all of those hours might be rajasic, but just one gauge that I just thought of this moment. But just kind of writing down all the little impressions, all the food that was fed to your mind. Some impressions include, like, if you stay in your house all day and are only seeing the same things just around your house all day, the same clutter or the same messy corner, messy closet or whatever, and you're not getting outside and doing anything in nature or really seeing anything outside, then that's actually a tamasic imprint, right? It's like dullness to the mind because it's the same thing every day. On the other hand, if you spend time walking in nature, if you spend time reading scripture of some sacred text that really appeals to you, that helps you connect to your heart, something greater than yourself, helps you learn higher spiritual perspective, right? These are all sattvic foods. So just kind of going ahead, taking a big list and inventory. And then next to each impression, you can write S, R, and or T, because some of them you might be like, oh, this impression was a little bit of both. So you can put more than one, or you can break it out into, this aspect of this activity was sattvic, but this aspect of the activity was rajasic. And then it just helps you start taking an inventory of your sensory impressions. And then of the ones that are really rajasic and tamasic, you can draw a little arrow next to them or a little dash and say, what's one way I could make this impression more sattvic? Whether you swap the impression for something totally different altogether. For example, instead of scrolling on like social media or sifting through online shopping or games, video games or movies or whatever, maybe I'll replace that impression with looking at art or reading a spiritual book or going outside, or even just looking out the window at the budding trees if it's spring where you are. Or swapping it for listening to some beautiful, uplifting music or spiritual music, or buying flowers and making a flower arrangement, doing arts and crafts, right? These are all falling under the category of sattvic. Or if it's like, well, I spent a lot of time at my kitchen sink and I've got to do that, so I can't swap that for another activity. Well, how can you beautify the area of the kitchen sink so that you have something to focus on? Because anything meditative is sattvic. And ideally, you start to bring mantra and spiritual practice and contemplation and spiritual focus and meditation into every activity, so that every activity you're doing actually becomes a moving prayer or an act of devotion or meditation in motion. And so then all the things that used to look rajasic or tamasic actually become sattvic because of the presence that you bring to the activity. And so even if while doing the dishes, you could beautify the area, you could put a little yantra or a little spiritual picture or something right above the sink if you don't have a window. You could put plants behind the edge of the sink to bring nature. Or you could simply repeat a mantra over and over and use that time to focus on Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Om as you're doing the dishes. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Hari Om. Or you can simply focus on your breath as you're doing the dishes, right? So this is how you bring these sattvic qualities. And now your dishes, which looks externally like in a rajasic activity because you're doing, becomes a sattvic activity because your energy and presence is there. You see? You're training the manas and taming the mind to focus on something that's sattvic and supportive while you're engaging in worldly acts. And ultimately, this is how you take yoga and meditation off the mat and off the cushion, because meditation isn't something that you do in your life. It becomes your way of being. And so that's really the next phase. So these are some, it's helpful to have a practice that you sit for and that you're present with. But ultimately your goal is to take it off the cushion, off the mat, into your everyday movement. And that's how you start bridging sattva into rajas, tamas, mostly into rajas. Predominantly because rajas has to be the thing that shakes up tamas. But that was a subject from our first session. So this is one thing. Mental digestion and mental detoxification starts with, number one, taming the mind, focusing the mind, meditating while moving, and reducing toxic impressions, reducing rajasic and tamasic impressions as much as humanly possible, and then bringing sattva into all activity so that those impressions become more wholesome for your mind as well. So Anne has a beautiful question here on this topic. Anne asked, or shared, I have to ask myself, why do I keep experiencing rajasic situations with and because of other people I get into contact with? It has ruined my nervous system, my health, and life. It's a terrible destiny. I can't heal experiencing these destructive patterns all the time. Oh, Anne, thank you so much for sharing that. This is a really, really important thing that you bring up, and we can all relate. I'll share a little bit of my perspective on this, and that is when rajasic tendencies and when trauma has imprinted our nervous system, it becomes a comfort. It becomes comfort just in that it's familiar. It might be uncomfortable, but it's in a weird way, in a weird kind of distorted way. It feels comfortable because it's all we've known. So we'll continue to engage with those kinds of habits because we're used to that. So maybe we're used to conflict, or we're used to these like rajasic situation people that can be really draining for us. So typically when I'll just share with you quite vulnerably and honestly, is that happened with me too. I didn't realize it was happening. And then finally I was just like, oh my gosh, why am I in this like super toxic relationship with my partner at the time? It was very rajasic and very tamasic. But it was like a fake, it was basically like a spiritual narcissist kind of character who seemed to be sattvic in certain ways, or seemed to value sattva, but actually was just like completely overridden by rajas and tamas and acting from that place. And I constantly felt on edge and like rajasic and tamasic within. And the thing that I realized during that time, so maybe this would help you, Anne, is I finally realized that I actually continued engaging in those situations because for me, there was a lower self-worth inside of myself, and I needed that person. Somehow they had hooked me enough to need their approval, love, and validation. And so once I finally let go and realized I'm not allowing this other person or situation to hold power over me, I'm going to release my attachment to that, all my energy came back to myself. Now that doesn't always mean you have to cut every relationship out of your life, but in some ways we don't realize that we're enabling these dynamics, like simply because maybe we don't know that we have a choice or a voice, and we don't know that it's okay to say no. I don't know the situations, the nuance and the situations of what you're describing or dealing with, but as I'm sharing, just like making some notes for yourself for self-reflection. When you think about disengaging from these rajasic situations with the people or the situations themselves, what are the things that immediately come up for you? You can write those down, even like the reasons why, these are the mental reasons why, but these will start to point to the deeper belief system. So once you see the external reasons why, you'll find it'll point to the deeper chitta or the deeper samskara, which is a conditioned way of being that has you continue to unconsciously engage in those dynamics that might be really irritating for you. And especially with respect to like narcissistic characters, that's a whole nother realm that I think is really important as we are healing trauma and growing spiritually. This is a hidden realm that most people aren't speaking to, that I was blown away because I was like, oh, I've been a victim of narcissism. And that narcissism has some very tricky ways that they override our own buddhi and our own, our ability to see clearly, and gaslighting and all these different techniques. So I don't know if that's something that you're open to exploring, but that might be one avenue to explore, to just see if if that's part of the pattern, because it's very crazy making. So it creates rajas in our system when we are being directly or indirectly manipulated by another person. And if we have wounding and trauma, we can easily fall prey to subtle manipulation, subtle or not so subtle manipulation from others, because it undermines our own ability to self-trust. Now, when we do this process of taming manas and healing the chitta and rewriting those samskaras, increasing buddhi, and backing ourselves and our trusting ourselves, backing our no, backing our yes, what we're saying yes to, what we're saying no to, and standing in our own wholeness and self-love, those situations no longer take over and create rajas for us. Okay, so Anne said, yes, I'm familiar with these relationships. Yes, I've been reflecting upon low self-worth. However, when I try to set boundaries, these are not accepted and laughed at. That is a huge red flag, Anne. If someone does not honor your boundaries and belittles them by laughing at them, then you need to not allow your boundary to be approved or validated by them. Because if you're saying, when I assert my boundaries, it doesn't work because they keep trampling over me, well, then a new boundary has to be established. And that boundary might be cutting that person out of your life completely. And I hate to say that, but that's the honest truth. If someone's not going to respect your boundaries, that's not okay. That's a huge red flag. Thank you for your honesty and sharing that. And a boundary isn't something that we use to control other people's behavior. It's what we set for ourselves in terms of what we want to experience. And if someone won't support your own boundary for your own self, they're not a trustable person. So she just commented, well, I get cut out of people's lives in the end. And so when we have a part of ourselves that needs those other people more than we value ourselves, then we will stay in those dynamics that are unhealthy for us. And that doesn't mean that you're left alone. So I think it's really important distinction here that is the deepest fear in setting a boundary that cuts someone else out of your life or perpetually creates a situation where you feel rejected by them and let out. That to you, to your inner child, to the wounded part, to that part of chitta and samskara, feels worse than death. And so we accept scraps and we hang on for dear life, and we don't actually get to experience the love that we deserve. And so my reminder to you in that situation, if that's what comes up, when you say, I get cut out of people's lives in the end, then I just want you to remember that you deserve and you will attract people who are trustable, loving, accepting of you, regardless of, in fact, that comes in so much quicker when you when you prioritize your self-worth and your self-love. And it's a tricky journey, and there's so much I can't map out for you just in this, in this moment, because it's just what you're sharing with me here. But being able to work with someone one-on-one that can support you to navigate the nuances of those relationships, it's just important to start exploring that for yourself. I have two great resources for you. If you said you're familiar with these types of relationships and like low self-worth, if it is a narcissism kind of thing that you're dealing with, and even if it's not, I think this woman would be a great resource for you. But her name's Meredith Miller, and she has a podcast and a YouTube channel called Inner Integration. And she has just amazing content that even scripts, like even exactly what to say to different people in your life, how to get out of, toxic cycles, toxic relationships, how to not feed into a narcissist's communication and so they don't drain your energy, things like that. She wrote a book called The Journey, which is self-healing from narcissistic abuse. So again, if it's specifically narcissism that you're dealing with, which could be validated by another book called The Wizard of Oz, which is about narcissism. But she's a great resource. That book is a great resource, but she's a great resource even if it's not only narcissism, just in terms of like, how do I speak into these situations? So Meredith Miller, Inner Integration, huge gratitude for her, because I've learned a lot from studying her work. And maybe that's a resource that'll help you. Yeah, my pleasure, Anne. Thank you for your appreciation and for sharing, honestly. I know these situations are really tricky. The more that you do these practices that we're sharing in these workshops, fortify your buddhi. As you fortify your buddhi, that buddhi is the crystal, right? That reflects the true flame, the true light of your soul, your atma, your true self. The more that you strengthen buddhi and that inner flame of your true self, the more you naturally feel worthy, self-love, discerning, and the ability to see through other people's BS, because you no longer have a codependent need on them for validation and approval. And so the grips that these situations have on our lives, they start to transform and shift. And it doesn't actually always mean that those people leave your life completely. When you start holding yourself in a new way, and are committed to that because you feel that resolution within you, the people around you have one of two choices. If you're no longer willing to contort yourself, this distorted view of what they need you to be, well, then what happens? They need to either rise to the occasion and honor you, or they need to remove themselves. Or, depending on the situation, you remove them. But I've also seen time and time again these amazing transformations that happen between people, where once the person has that resolve and they feel the fullness of, they back themselves, they trust themselves, they have self-love, they're connected to the divine, they know they have all of the protection that they need energetically from God, from the universe. And then the world around them transforms. The people around them transform. And those people either rise up, or new amazing people are attracted to you in beautiful ways, and opportunities and situations are attracted to you in a number of ways. So thank you for this beautiful share, and for an opportunity for all of us to reflect on those things, because, truly, we're talking about food for the manas, the mind, and these experiences. I mean, our interpersonal relationships are one of the biggest factors in our current state of mental pain, anguish, or suffering, is how we're relating to the world around us. So thank you so much for bringing this in, and for your honesty and openness and sharing. So the 3 ways to do the detoxification. So now we're on to mental detoxification. there's three ways: physical, so there's gross or physical, subtle energetic, and causal or kind of spiritual, the causal realm, which is connected more to the energetic fabric of our very existence. So in order for mental detoxification to be effective, most effective, we want to hit all three of these levels: gross, subtle, and causal, physical, energetic, or physical, energetic, and spiritual. And so here's the way that you do that. Here's the way that you detoxify on these three levels. So first level is the physical level. So the gross level of detoxification happens physically. This is where we purify our diet, cleanse. This could be eating mung soup every day or khichdi every day. If you need recipes for that, you can search online. I've written a lot of them online, mostly on Banyan botanicals. Khichdi, search YouTube for Banyan khichdi Alicia Lynn Diaz or Alicia Diaz or something, and you'll get the exact recipe on how to make khichdi, which is a detoxifying, simple food of just rice and mung dal, rice and beans. And you could put vegetables in it. I like to put lots of water in it. I do it a little bit different than the video says. I put more water in it than that recipe. But you basically just make this very, very simple porridge or soups, homemade soups, mung bean stew, which if you search Google for Dr. Naram mung bean soup recipe, he's got a great green mung bean soup recipe. It's very delicious, and you'll get to see all the testimonials of how many people love that recipe and have healed their bodies, minds, and emotions from that recipe. And then there's also Banyan botanicals. If you search Banyan botanicals, mung bean recipes, lots of recipes will come up that are Ayurvedic and have lots of different variations. So yeah, you can do something very simple like eating, doing 30 days of just mung bean soup, or you can do one meal a week of mung bean soup, or you can try to add mung bean soup into your diet every day for one meal, something like this. Mung beans are very rare and unique in that they are detoxifying and nourishing at the same time. And they create calmness in the nervous system. It's a really, really wonderful meal. And you can do so many different variations by adding different types of vegetables or serving it with sides of different types of vegetables. And most Panchakarma or Ayurvedic detox protocols involve some of these soups that I'm mentioning here. But you can harness the power of this in your own home and starting to support the subtle detoxification of your mind and emotions by eating these kinds of sattvic simple foods. So mung bean soup, stew, and khichdi are sattvic. And especially if you leave out the garlic and onions, they're sattvic, because garlic and onions are actually rajasic. They disturb the mind. I see Andrew shaking his head. He's aware of this. Most meditators, like serious meditators, will cut all garlic and onions out of their diet because of that, the agitation in the mind. They also cut out meat, and primarily meat, because when we consume the flesh of an animal, we actually consume all of the energy of that animal, and particularly how the animal lived and how the animal died. And which is, they're flooded with fear, and especially if it's in the mainstream, meat market, they're treated horribly. So we're imbibing that anxiety, not to mention, so it's tamasic food, but not to mention, in addition, the principle of ahimsa, which maybe in future classes we can talk about the yogic path and the yamas and the niyamas, which are all very supportive for the mind. But the very first yama of the Yoga Sutras is ahimsa, and that's doing no harm to any creatures. So some people will take that even as far as to eliminate most dairy products unless they're cultivated locally in smaller family farms. And because we don't want to take in the energy of harm. So if we're trying to heal trauma specifically and to create more sattva and more harmony and balance in the mind, then we don't want to consume foods that energetically create an imbalance there. So garlic, onions, and meat, and then even some other animal products as well, depending on their source. And then some people will take it as far as wheat as well, because wheat and gluten are inherently clogging and tamasic, and they're very heavy on the digestion. And most of the wheat strains have been adulterated at this point. So we're getting lots of other toxins in our wheat sources. So those are some foods that you might consider, at least for a little while. If you're eating them now, I know there's a lot of stigma associated with these kinds of things, changing our diet and our lifestyle in that way. But if you don't want it to be a forever thing, just consider a short period of time, or like a 1 day a week, or a 1 week a month, or every weekend, or 30 days or 90 days or 6 months or something. If that helps you just be like, I'm just going to experiment with this and see how I feel, but I'm not going to put these heavy rules on myself so that I feel restrained, because that's also important. We want to have freedom in our mind and not feel like we have to make ourselves smaller and deprived. So just some things to consider as you're assessing your own life and your own situation and the influence of foods on your mind. So recognize that the foods that I just listed can create some more rajasic and tamasic tendencies in the mind. And if you want to support sattva, you want to eat lots of wholesome vegetable, plant-based, rich foods, lots of fresh sprouts, fresh greens, fresh vegetables. Grow some of your own vegetables, grow your own herb garden. Even if you can only have pots on your balcony, grow some of your own herbs. Drink tulsi. Tulsi, holy basil, is one of the most sattvic herbs and sattvic teas. It opens our spiritual centers. It connects us to the divine in our body. Rose tea, Tulsi rose, is one of my personal favorites. And it's very, very calming and soothing and clarifying for the manas, for the mind. And it creates a spiritual upliftment and an opening in the heart. So some things to consider around food. And then also on the other level of physical detox is also taking a period of time that you actually do a cleanse or do some kind of detox. And you can do that guided or through your own self-study. And I have some resources for that if that interests you. But any type, even if all you did was do khichdi for 4 days, that's going to give you a little bit of a cleanse. Khichdi for 3 days or khichdi for 1 day a week, right? There's going to be some positive effects on the physical level. So the second level is the subtle energy level of detoxification. Anne just said pig thyroid hormones had a totally rajasic influence on me. It was terrible. So there are rajasic medicines as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And there are many like vegan, more sattvic versions of a lot of supplements and vitamins and nutrients now, which is amazing. So and most pharmaceuticals are rajasic or tamasic. Most of the psych meds are tamasic because they dull our ability to feel emotion. And so they just kind of bury the emotion so that one day later down the road, we'll have to face it, but it's going to stack up. So better that we start to learn how to purify manas, enhance buddhi, and clear the chitta now so that things don't just get swept under the rug and build up over time. Okay, so the second level, the subtle energy detoxification. Da, 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 da. This is the beautiful one. We've been doing this all along. Pranayama, breathwork practices. So the way that you detoxify the subtle energy body is by doing regular breathwork every day. First thing in the morning, ideally, right when you wake up. Now, you can do simple, as simple as just deep diaphragm breathing. You can do the practices that we do at the beginning of our sessions, the humming breath, and, with the ears closed or not, the mantra breath, which starts to bridge into the next section. But really deep breathing and alternate nostril breathing. There's all kinds of breathwork practices that are really calming and soothing. And we can talk about more of these in upcoming workshops. But also, interestingly, sweat-inducing therapies. So part of Panchakarma, Ayurvedic detoxification protocols, is they do all kinds of sweating therapies, dry sauna or steam room, and then pin the sweat and different kinds of practices that, like, they use hot rice bags and they put them on your skin and they draw the toxins back to the central channel so they can be eliminated. And all of these sweating therapies help release physical toxins, but they also relieve energetic and emotional, the mental toxins on the subtle energy levels as well. So they work on that level. Anne said, or salt baths. Yeah, salt baths are great for that too. Salt baths also bridge physical and energetic because salt itself absorbs negative energy into it. And then the salt also is like detoxifying, for your body as a whole. It gives you those good minerals and all of that. So salt baths, and it helps you sweat. So you release that out into the water. Yeah, there's a whole, just you saying salt brings up a whole nother category, which is a vastu, which is Ayurvedic, the doshas of your home. Some would call it Ayurvedic feng shui, but that's very inappropriate and demeaning. but if you think it's analogous to feng shui, and putting little containers of salt in every corner of your home helps absorb any of the negative effects of your environment. Also having salt lamps in your home, they absorb negative energies out of the environment. So those all help on the subtle level too. So thanks for bringing that up, Anne. And the other thing that's really good for the subtle energy body is crying. Sincere flow of tears that creates a genuine change of heart. So yeah, just pure tears, crying tears, when they're ripe to be cried, is another way that the mind can actually be purified. And then the third stage is the causal level of detoxification. And this is where, drum roll, this is where mantra comes in, because mantra these are sounds, these are seed sounds, especially like bija mantras, these seed syllables are the fabric of our very existence, the cause of life. So they're on the causal level, energetic level of existence from which all matter and energy is born. So practicing mantra helps detoxify the causal level of your being, and it reorients every aspect of your Antikarna back to its source. So powerful. I'm gonna let that sink in for a second. I am out of water and my throat is very dry. I'm gonna have a herbal lozenge now. So mantra and sound therapy actually transform and rewrite the level of chitta, the storehouse. I started having this incredible experience after I'd practiced mantra and self-sound therapy for a while. The mantras started coming into my nightmares, into my subconscious. I would remember the mantras in my dreams. They started rewiring me from like the inside out. Not only that, some of the beautiful ways, like I mentioned earlier in this session, just chanting mantras that have a melody and a tune, you start singing them throughout the day. And sometimes even when you're waking consciousness, at just the right moments, when you're having some like a challenging emotion come up or a mental spiral where manas just takes you for a ride and you kind of feel like you're hijacked, those are the moments where all of a sudden the mantra melody that you had starts singing. And I had some profound experiences with that personally. My clients, because we use a lot of mantra therapy, my clients have shared that in their depth of like releasing emotions, that mantras would come into their awareness and they felt like it was like going through their whole system and just like rewiring. So it actually creates mantras, create healthy new samskaras in your chitta, in your subconscious mind, starts to become rewired and reoriented to the higher divine nature, your true self, your atma, the part of you that is just witnessing all these fluctuations, the part of you that is eternal, timeless soul. One of the other ways you can use mantra or sound therapy is simply using the bija sound Om. So we've been using Hari Om, but you can also just use plain Om. All of the letters of the Sanskrit alphabet are bija sounds and some of the compound sounds. So there's lots of different sounds for different effects. But the simple one that pervades all is just Om. So just saying, over and over and over, tunes you into that essence, rewires that causal level, connects you to that causal level, your spiritual self. And you can also use these self-sound therapies like in water, because our whole body is made of water. And so when you're taking an Epsom salt bath, for example, you can start chanting the mantras and the sound vibrates in all the molecules of the water and vibrates every cell in your body. And there's such a profound effect in overall healing, the energetic and the causal level that translates to the physical as well. Okay. I'm just peeking at my notes if that was everything I wanted to share with you on that. Yeah. All these these mantras are really powerful for rewriting the chitta, is basically the take-home message. So just to summarize, physical, energetic, and causal levels, these 3 levels of detoxification of the mind. The physical, doing physical cleansing, eating sattvic physical food, then also feeding your mind sattvic food, right? Stopping the toxic impressions that come in. And then the energetic, pranayama, doing pranayama practices, breathwork practices, and then chanting mantra and connecting to a mantra meditation practice that really feels supportive for you. And I have a few different mantra meditation practices on my Peaceful Soul podcast that are already pre-recorded, that have, just nice with the harmonium, longer ones. I also have 2 little courses, like mini courses that are very inexpensive, like one's $7 and one's $40 or something like that. But they're a mantra meditation course that you can find on my website at Alicia Lynn Diaz. And I go through a bunch of different longer mantras and all, how to pronounce them, what they mean, and then practices so that you can learn them. Really amazing mantras, depending on the different energy that you want to cultivate. One's called Prayers for Peace, and one's called Mantra Meditations. The Mantra Meditation ones has a lot more. And then there's tons of lovely ones, on YouTube and on Spotify and anywhere, like lots of different musicians that have beautiful long mantra songs, kirtan songs, which are longer call and response kind of mantras that are chanted. And so you can find one that just really appeals to you. The ones, listen to them all day long, let them get stuck in your head. They'll come in and support you right when you need it. It's so amazing and powerful. And it's one of the just greatest ways to condition manas and to focus the mind. And it's great because you can use it anywhere you are. You don't have to sit still to do a meditation or a breathwork session, for example. You can be doing mantra while you're doing dishes, doing laundry. You can be chanting mantra while you're driving your car, while you're walking, while you're exercising. You want to ride that mantra into your heart and let it be the backdrop of everything that you do. There's lots of great practices with this as well. One is called japa meditation, where you have prayer beads that you hold, and that just helps you focus physically and energetically and mentally on the mantra repetition. So something like that can be a helpful tool. But even if you're just chanting it out loud while you're doing things, starts to bring your energy focus. Because the thing that's important here is that you're no longer allowing the mind to just flit and flicker and go take you wherever it wants to take you. It'll take you into dark places. It'll take you into self-deprecating places. It'll take you into anxious places and fearful places. You'll have fake conversations with people in your mind. You'll have regrets and future plans. Like the mind is just going to go, right? You know what I'm talking about. Your mind is going to go do its thing. That is the nature of the mind. It's consuming constantly. The nature of the mind is to consume constantly. And if it doesn't have something productive to consume, it's going to consume its own thoughts. So we want to not be a slave to the mind. We don't want manas to be holding the steering wheel of our car, driving us all over the place in search of something more, better, getting away from something I don't want. Like it's just going to take you all over the place. Rather, you want the mind to be your ally to serve your higher self, because the mind can be brilliant and clear and focused and tame when it is serving its true servant, which is your Atma, your higher self, through which Buddhi is a reflection. So you want your higher mind to guide the way for the manas, the lower mind. And so we do that in way. Mantra is an incredible tool for doing that. Clean up your physical diet, do some breath work practices, get all the prana channels moving in your body, and then chant mantra all day long. All day long. Listen to a mantra before you go to sleep, wake up with it first thing in the morning, and train that mind, train that manas to chew on something that's very, very supportive. It's the highest food for the mind. Okay, any last questions for today before we wrap up with our closing practice? Anne Catherine asked, what does the head movement do when chanting Hari Om? So Hari Om can be chanted just like we did earlier, just as a song, or it can be chanted as a practice, just steady. When you move the head with it, it's called Utgit Pranayama, which basically I translate to like the mantra breath, because you're chanting Hari Om. The neck movement changes how the energy moves in your body when you chant Hari Om. And it particularly works with the throat chakra, and it compresses all the marmath points on the back of your neck, which helps the energetic movement of all the energies along, which helps bring that energy into your whole body. So yeah, so when you do the head movement, your chin goes down to say ha, and then it comes up like you're drawing a big circle out, and then you say re until you bring your head all the way back, and then om goes from back here all the way back down till chin's tucked, and then until you're in om. And that just creates a big energy cycle that it helps us open the throat chakra, helps us speak our truth, feel empowered in our expression, and then also circulates all the energies in the body. Great question. Any other questions for today, friends? As you assess if you have any more questions, feel free to type them in. I'm going to read this poem once more, this beautiful one from earlier, because it's just too good. And then if no other questions come in, we will wrap up with a little topic for today. Let's do a few rounds of Hari Om, and then we'll chant Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Om Shanti, just sending our prayers out. May this conversation not only benefit us, but benefit beyond us into all the other beings in our life, into our communities, and may it benefit all of existence, and may all beings in all existence be at peace, be free, be blessed. The name of the book, Sue asked the name of the book. The name of this book is The Radiant Sutras by Lauren Roche. That's the one I've been reading all these meditation poems out of. It's just an absolutely gorgeous book. It's the 112 Gateways to the Yoga of Wonder and Delight. I took some workshops with him, and just what an embodied, amazing human. It's just so gorgeous. And then the other book that I referenced, yes, thank you, Radiant Sutras, correct. That's one. Another book that I referenced is called The Journey. I actually have it over here. A Roadmap for Self-Healing After Narcissistic Abuse by Meredith Miller. That was another resource I gave you guys earlier. And then the other book I mentioned was The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And there's many different authors and translators of that book, but that's one that we referenced briefly earlier that you might like. And then Dr. David Frawley, the quote that I read out of that book earlier was over here, Ayurveda and the Mind by Dr. David Frawley, The Healing of Consciousness. Some of his, anyway, he's amazing. He's amazing. Some of his, the way he describes things are a little bit different than I'm describing here. I hope that I'm doing it a simple job of like helping you analyze these concepts. Some of the ways that are translated, he amalgamizes all different approaches. So I teach it the way that Dr. Ladd, my teacher, directly taught me. So also sending love and honor to Dr. Ladd. Okay, no other questions. Let's remember this. This body, these bodies are made of earth and gold, sky and stars, rivers and oceans, masquerading as muscle and bone. Every substance is here, diamonds and silver, magical elixirs, ambrosia that gives visions, herbs that nourish and heal. The foundation of the planet, immortal magnetic iron circulating in the blood. Every element in you loves the others. Earth loves rain, sky loves sun, sun loves the space it shines through. Space loves everyone equally. In meditation, luxuriate in knowing this deep and simple truth. Every cell is an organ of sense, infused with majesty. Let's chant Hari Om together 3 times and then the closing prayer. Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Om. Loka samasta Sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta Sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta Sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Blessings. Thank you so much for being here, you all.